What's happening, Andy here? I'm joined today by Brian Bissett, publisher of the MFP Report. How are you, Brian?
Doing well. Thank you, Andy.
Great to see you. Brian, you're a great friend of
Former
mine.
publisher.
Former
Former
publisher. Well, that's
publisher.
what we're here to talk about. You're an analyst in this industry. You're a bit of a legend. You're one of the first analysts I met when I came to work here with my dad in '96, and you're already off and running with the MFP report. I
I
had
started
hair.
in the end of 95. I can remember the first time I think we met. We were at a Data Quest, annual copier conference kind of thing. And you and your dad were in the row ahead of me.
No
And I
kidding.
think I probably introduced myself, and you were a little kid.
I was a little kid and I probably had hair. You didn't, but I did. So, I've changed a little and you haven't. So I wanted to, take some time and celebrate an amazing career, a well-earned retirement. And, let's share a little about how you started it and what you did for all these years.
So how I started it was sort of by I don't know, by accident. So I had worked for what, a dozen years or more in kind of ECM software, not like through any grand design. It's just what I ended up doing. I was marketing. I worked at a small company, actually started out of graduate school, a company that consulted on nuclear power plants and got involved in regulatory stuff. They started developing ECM software just to manage their own quantity of documents. Worked there a few years. Then I went over to what is now Laserfiche, and they were sort of in a couple of different areas at the time. Worked there, 4 years or so, I think, and then went to a company called Xionyx, which was an old uh, competitor of Kofax at the time, but before software was the thing. So both companies made basically interface boards and tools so you could use fancy monitors and high-speed scanners because those weren't supported in Windows directly back then. Did that for several years. They were VC funded. Then they had an entire change of management came in. They brought in an outside management team, and I was commuting to Boston from Los Angeles for a year. And my kids were small, and how shall we say, the CEO and I did not see eye to eye on much of anything. And they gave me a very generous package to be gone. And after traveling that much, I said, I want to do something close to home. I realized back then I was not the world's greatest manager or employee. Um, yeah, I tended to identify with the people below me and not the people above me. So I enjoyed writing an analysis, and I thought I need to find a topic. In the last 6 months or so at Xionyx, they got purchased a company that did embedded software for printers, and it still exists. It's been through like six different acquisitions out there. It's actually part of Qualcomm these days. But so I thought, well, I have money coming in. This is kind of a now or never type of thing. I had a consulting gig with a former board member who, was going to tide me over for a while, and I just started researching and stuff. I thought I would grow a company, and I realized that's really not my strength either. So started the newsletter. I remember going to the BTA show in the dead of summer in Las Vegas and went to my first, or not wasn't my first, but my first Comdex doing this, beginning of November, and made a list of all the vendors there and went out and talked to people and came back. And the first issue was heavily focused on, writing up my impressions and findings of what was going on at Comdex. And that was, the era where the big product I was looking at was Canon's GP55, which was, their first go at sort of a true digital
Digital,
copier.
I remember that.
I met, Sam Yoshida was the product manager on it at the time. And so, just started going. I was fortunate, and then although I didn't really realize it at the time with a subscription business like that, people paid you up front. So I had money to tide me over, and then people started paying, and I just had to deliver
So
stuff to
let's
them.
back up a little. Let's back up a little. This was not the internet age, right? This was
It was
I,
very,
and
very,
I
very
started this in
early.
the internet age. I started my newsletter in the newsletter in this age. So it was a lot easier, a lot different. So how did you get awareness? How did you put your
I bought some mailing lists actually at the time, and there was the defined group of, companies out there. There was a lot more second and third and fourth tier printer vendors than there are now. But every time I would go to something, I'd get a list, and collect business cards, and I've swapped lists with some people that weren't competitive, and but we're in the sort of same area. And building a database was a big thing. I still have a huge database, most of which is highly, highly outdated now. But I used to do a lot more just sending sample issues out and doing mailers. I mean, you didn't do email blasts in those days. It
No.
was postcards, or for a few years, I would do a version of the newsletter that had the front and the back, and inside was a pitch. And, just build it up over time. And then there was sort of a big transition over time from lots of individual subscriptions to where then companies started licensing and saying, here's an electronic version, you can distribute it internally. But I mean, I was learning as I was going.
So how big
I
was
think I was
the first issue? How many pages was the first issue?
16 pages. Again,
That's pretty good for one event.
But it was printed on a DocuText, so you had to do signatures. So it's either going to be, 8 or 12 or 16 or 20. There was an occasional 20-page issue. There was an occasional 24, occasional 16, but most of them were 20 until I went to electronic, which was, I don't know, 10, 12 years ago, I guess. Made it a lot
So
easier.
you went all electronic about 12 years ago, and so you were physically mailing this out for years. When did you get to
Child
the
labor
format? Like when did you settle on the format that you're using,
I
that you
mean,
used right
it's
up until the
been
end?
pretty much the same since the beginning. The one thing I used to do, like a 2-page interview every month, and they became kind of a pain because in some ways I kind of ran out of people to talk to. And as you know, writing an interview based on a conversation is challenging. Sometimes people are really good just kind of talking with you, but
Yeah.
it's hard to structure it into something readable. And I didn't want to get into, I'm not a stenographer. So, then I kind of, I found it was the thing I was like pushing till the end of the month each time. And,
Oh,
can I
yeah.
get somebody? And, are they going to flake out on me? So that I just dropped maybe, I don't know, a dozen or more years ago and didn't seem to miss it. I mean, the other thing is before COVID, but certainly when COVID started to, a lot more focused just on the financials because the financial impact on the industry was so great. And, also there weren't nearly as many products and other things going on. There weren't dealer meetings to talk about, and, people rolled back on product launches and things like that. So, I mean, I've had no business classes in my entire life. So I'm a little bit, self-taught to the
Me
extent
either.
I know how to go through, an annual report or a quarterly report and highlight things and stuff. But I enjoyed the non-product stuff increasingly over the years.
Well, I have to say, looking back on your career and the people in this industry, especially the analyst core, the news, the media, of which I've been a part of for a very long time, you are without a doubt the one that would say anything without, accurately. I mean, but you never held back.
I
You
was holding back, Andy.
well, maybe you were, but I didn't see it that way. You said a lot of times you said what needed to be said. I have a lot of clients, and I'll be the first one to say it. I am very careful what I say about them. I try to help them and position them in a good way while also providing the news and everything. But you were just news and really commentary, and it was so enjoyable. I want to talk about page two. Page two. I would read your headlines on the first page and I would go right to page two because I always felt like if you were on page two, you were in big trouble. Let's talk about that. How that evolved. That was your real. What did you call that?
I think I called it comments. Yeah, I mean, I know that was since the first issue. In fact, the very first one I wrote was about the frustration with the emerging industry couldn't settle on a name to call things. Was it an MFP? Was it a multifunction printer? Was it a multifunction device? Was it a printer, scanner, copier? So, that kind of got me on a roll. And it was interesting. Almost every month, that was the last thing I would write in the issue. Every so often, I'd have like what I thought was a great idea, which to me means it was kind of pithy, but it also flowed and was easy to get out. I've had a lot of months where I had an idea that seemed really good, and then I would start writing it, and it just couldn't go anywhere. And I've had some where it's like, okay, I've spent 4 hours, it's like 75% done. I don't like it, start again.
Yeah.
But those were always, at the end of the month, especially if it was a month with like a meeting or a trade show and where there was a lot to cover. And, the good ideas could be done in 3 hours and the rough ones would take 2 days. I was very conscious over time. I felt like there were certain themes that I would come back on. and I didn't want to be too repetitive, but they were also important things. So I would, over the years wrote a lot about not just printing and copying, but scanning and software and, the role in the market and the business model. I've done multiples on, M&A and, it was almost like, fantasy football, who should buy whom and trade whom and do what. Um, Probably the one I've written about the most, if in a broad general sense, was criticisms of product management / marketing. Just it's a pet peeve of mine.
Oh, I could tell. I could
um,
tell.
well, and my benchmark always was, you know, I've chosen to do this as a career, so I make the effort every month to find your product, to understand what's new, to look at your campaign, to see what you're talking about. Yet, customers have no obligation or interest in doing them. And if I find it frustrating and I'm supposed to be in a position, or at least you're communicating with me and I'm meeting you more than halfway to understand something, I put on my customer hat and say, this must be really difficult for them.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, let's talk
why should
about
I
that.
deal with company X, Y, or Z if they can't even be bothered to explain what they're doing?
Let's talk about that. I think that's a good segue, right? Let's talk about, you've got probably some pretty strong opinions on how the marketing and especially the communication was when you started this newsletter, and let's compare it to how it is now that you're winding it down, or
Well,
you finished it.
A big conundrum in my mind is I can remember, as you can too, back in the mid 90s. I mean, a product launch, especially one that was, of some import, it took months of work, just the logistics, printing press kits, printing press releases, getting data sheets. And back then people would say, here's a new feature, let's do a background on it, explain it, and, what the relevance is and where it came from. They had to get photographs reproduced. And now, for
There was
years, it's
effort. There
been,
was so much effort.
and there was always a PR firm involved as well. Um, for years now, it's been so easy economically, technically, time wise to just blast stuff out. And I find it odd and frustrating that it's never been easier, yet it's never been done more poorly.
Thank you. Thank you. I knew you were going to say this. We've had conversations like this before, but it is one of the most frustrating things about our jobs is they used to push it to us, and now they expect us to go get it, which is fine. But A, they don't always like what we go get, especially you. And then, they're not controlling the story anymore like they used to. They used to really put every piece of information in our hands. They would make their people available to us, the follow up, the NDAs before the product came out, and it was even for very minor products. It was
No,
just
now
like,
it's almost sort of an implicit sigh when you ask anything.
yeah, yeah. It's
And
interesting.
again,
I
I
mean,
look
we
at it
are a
from a
mature
customer's
industry.
perspective. So you launch 6 new products that replace 6 old products. There must have been a reason,
Yeah,
but far be it for me to understand what it is, because you don't say, they'll say a vendor will put out a press release, repeat, highlight 3 things that were actually in the old products and have been in there forever. Not mention things that I like. Oh, by the way, this is 20% faster and 10% cheaper. You might want to tell people.
yeah.
Uh,
Or, I mean, they launch these things, and then, I mean, a lot of them don't even do the press releases anymore at all. And
no,
it's really, I don't understand that. You're a hardware company, you make hardware, you came out with a new piece of hardware. To your point, let's tell us why this is better than what
well,
it's
so for
doing.
example, HP, was HP and Xerox were always the gold standard years ago doing
Yes,
it in different ways, but yes.
yes.
And HP at some point decided it was almost embarrassed of hardware. So it's like, we can't announce individual things. We have to wait and clump them all together and have a big shebang that's like 28 new models. But we don't know what the models are. We don't have prices. We can't really tell you one. Then they're going to be coming between April and May, and then they show up in August. And by then they don't want to talk about them. And
It's
it's,
diluted. I agree. It's not the same as it used to be. And
and I think it's twofold. One
it's
is,
all of them.
well, the cost cutting. So I think
Yeah.
there's just, while it's easier to do things, there's fewer people expected to do a lot more than it was
There's
10,
no
20 years ago.
excuse now. Chat GPT and the internet, there's no reason they can't be flooding our inboxes with good information about what they're doing and updating. And it's
Well,
it's
that was,
across the
yeah.
board. It is.
Well, and that was, it was a huge lost opportunity during COVID, what it was, 1, 2, 3 years, whatever you want to measure it, when people weren't doing events and things like that. I can count on one hand the number of people that did like a virtual thing. And that was usually for a virtual sales meeting. Epson did one, Comic and Malta did one,
Nobody does
as
them.
opposed, yeah, as opposed to, gee, we're tap dancing. The world thinks our business is coming to an end. Maybe we should get some people on Zoom, and, once every 6 months and say, here's the honest fact of what's going on, the good, the bad, whatever.
I agree.
And,
I
you
agree.
know, and nobody was doing it.
And nobody is. It's
No,
there's
and
very
now
few
that's become a
briefings
habit
anymore the way
now.
they did. They don't bring us out. Not that they need to bring us out, but to your point, a webinar, like they don't even
Yeah.
do those that much anymore.
Take an
Very
hour of
few of
time
them
and
and very rare.
with half day of preparation and,
Just give me an
you know,
hour
and,
and an update every now and then would be nice.
yeah. Well, and I think that's also, there's sort of been, whether it's intentional or not, a changing view of the role or value of industry analysts. Um, the companies are more thin-skinned than they used to be in some ways. They're aware of the challenges, but they don't like when somebody sort of reiterates that or points them out. Um, Indeed, they are focused on things beyond hardware. So I'm very well able to understand that, if I'm covering your traditional print product line, that's not your main focus. But I don't see them doing a better job in IT services or anything else. If anything, there's more customer public facing verbiage for that side of things. But I'm a stickler for, I don't want to see a commercial or a YouTube ad. And at the end of it, it's like, that's nice, but what is it you're doing?
Yeah. Yeah.
Good stuff for good people with good technology is not a strategy.
I agree. You've got and all ads, not even just our industry. The ads now are just
No, yeah.
out there. And it's just like you're expected to know. Like if I don't know what this company is and they're just showing me people walking and holding hands and sunsets, and it's just like, I don't know if that was a hotel. I don't know what I just watched anymore.
Well, that's like, then I watch the news in the morning and there's always these weight loss things. And it's like, go low. And it's like, okay, so is it a pill? Is it a shot? Is it like a talky thing? I don't know, but it makes
Yep.
you happy.
Yep. It makes you happy. So let's before I let you go, I want to maybe if I asked you, give me a memory or a couple memories. Let's start with one. What jumps out at you? What's one of the first things that pops in the head over the career that you had doing this?
This is a little like micro memory, but it was very meaningful to me. I think it was the first CeBIT I went to in Germany in like 90, it was probably 96. And I'm flying back, I'm on a 747, and like 3 rows over, and I see somebody reading my newsletter. And it was actually was a small software company that the old Jetfax had bought. And I had took a bunch with me. I was giving them out there, and it's like, oh, it's like I'm on a international flight and somebody's reading my product. That was kind of a, early on, that was a nice wake up moment.
That must have felt really good.
There was just, I can remember, and this harks back to a different era and a different set of mores, I think. So, as many people know, 20 years ago, my older son was in a very bad car accident, and I was like delayed an issue. I wasn't traveling and everything, and that was in January of 2002, I believe, and I was at the old PC Expo in June of that year, and I'm in Jacob Javits Center in New York, and I'm going up an escalator, and across as going down the escalator is Ann Mulcahy, the former CEO of Xerox. And she yells across, I heard about your son. How's he doing? Anything we can do? Those were the touching times. And, I would say to this day, despite my being necessarily not the easiest person sometimes, although I think I'm much nicer in person than I am in writing.
I agree.
I have not, I would say 97% of the people I've dealt with are very nice people in this industry. I mean, the number of true pain in the backside folks is very, very, very small. And I don't think you can always say that in a lot of work careers.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Anne was a
Yeah, and these
special.
were people you could, talk to, have, a debate over something and still sit down and have dinner or a drink and be fine.
Yeah. And Anne was one of those people. She was a legend and an absolute just one of the most special people and saved that company. And they're they sat down with her. I was told the executives now have reached out to her and they want to know the secret sauce. They want to try to get that back. I don't know. Hopefully they can, but it's fun. It's nice to see them doing that. And she was just one of the most class acts I think in our industry. And it was awesome. That was a good time for Xerox.
Yeah, no, I mean, it just the and there were lots of things like that over the years too. People were just basically nice. And it shouldn't be understated that, we get treated very well historically over the years. I mean, we're flown to places and we're fed good food and we listen to things and they seek our feedback. There's worse things in life to do.
Yeah.
And there's times it's like, this is all just based because I like to write and analyze things. And
That's
I'm
it.
some kid,
People
some
want to
kid
know
from
what
the
you have to
suburbs of New
say.
Jersey. So,
And that's not
we
easy.
got exposed to things that I would not have gotten exposed to doing other kinds of jobs.
Yeah.
And
Well,
I'm
working for
appreciative of that.
yourself, for sure. Working for
Yeah.
yourself. But you were a rare breed in this business. You were somebody who spoke your mind, said it the way it was, and did it in a way that you still got invited back. You didn't, people understood that you were speaking from facts. Um, people didn't like to hear their baby was ugly sometimes, and I know, we've been in a lot of meetings that may have been, let's just say,
Got a lot of ugly babies, but
contentious, right? You and a
well, the
couple
other
other
thing I did
guys.
too is I'm not one to like, quote people in articles and stuff. And in fact, I almost, even in the management changes and stuff, I typically did not cover those unless they were really consequential. Because I mean, yes, if I'm criticizing a product, the product manager for that takes it personally sometimes. But I never, said this CEO is a jerk or that marketing
No,
person know what they're doing, or
you
I always
question
wanted to keep it
strategies.
very impersonal.
You question strategies, you question products, you ask hard questions, and sometimes they didn't have the answers to those hard questions. And when somebody asks you something, you know the answer, you don't look good, and people took offense to that. But I have to say, you always got invited back, and to your credit, that's not easy to
Almost always.
do, right? Like if you say something bad about one of these manufacturers, they get offended, they get upset, and usually, a lot of times you're off the list, but you never did in all those years. You were always at the meetings, you were always on the invite list. Um, People didn't always love to see you, but they always wanted to hear what you had to say, and they always, fingers crossed, were hoping they were not on page two. That's what I took out. That was my favorite thing. Sometimes I wouldn't read, the whole thing, but I always started with that page because it was just
You and
like,
your dad
who's
both. I
Brian
still
mad
hear
at
from your
this month?
dad every so often on those.
Well, who's Brian mad at right now? And that
Yeah.
was, or who's making his life difficult. And it was just sort of, to me, it was where you vented almost. And I enjoyed that.
Yeah. No, it was. And one of the things that as you're saying this, that I realized that changed that makes it easier for me to retire, I think, is I realized myself that there was a point several years ago, 5, 6, 7 years ago, where, I kind of lost the desire to do the ask a hard question in a face-to-face meeting because I didn't expect I was going to get a good answer or an answer that was meaningful. And it was like, it's going to frustrate them. It's going to frustrate me. I may try offline to get an answer, but, I mean, there were years, 15, 20 years ago where we'd go to meetings and Angel would always ask the first question. She was the senior person in the industry, and it was always a multi-part pointed question. And then I would kind of follow up with my version of a question, and I think we both knew that people groaned sometimes.
Well, she was another one that was awesome. And, I miss my friends. I'm going to miss you very much.
That's the hardest part, actually, is just we all sort of grew up together within. I can remember the first meeting I went to was a RICO meeting in New Orleans in early '96. And I remember your dad was there. It was the first time I kind of chatted with him and stuff. And now I realize it's like he was younger then than my age now.
Isn't that crazy? I think about that when my dad was my age and where he was. I was actually working for him at that point. Um, this has been a pleasure, man. I appreciate you coming on and sharing with us. And I am going to miss you very much.
Well, I'm
Keep
sure
in
maybe our
touch. I'm
paths will
always
cross
happy
soon.
to run your angry page too anytime you
I
want.
don't want to be the cranky old guy on the lawn, though, writing letters.
And I love the fact that you're actually going to ride off into the sunset. As much as it bums me out, it's, we don't see that a lot of times. People in our world, and I'm sure I'm going to be like this. A lot of my dad was able to kind of ride
It
off,
took him a while, and he was very
but he
happy when he
did. He
did.
did it, and I
I
don't know
think he
that I
wished he
can
did
do
it a
it.
couple of years earlier.
I don't know that he could do it, that I could do it. But congrats to you, man. It's been an
Yeah.
incredible run. I'm going to miss your publication. Any last words for our audience?
Check back with me in 6 months and see if I've lost my mind.
I will check back with you before that. And good luck and enjoy it, man. Enjoy your time and enjoy California, your kids and your family and everything. You earned it. It's been a great
Thank you
run.
very
And
much.
I'm very proud to have known you, proud to have sat with you in those meetings, and I learned an absolute ton from you over the years. Thanks for everything you did.
Thanks, Andy. I appreciate it. Good luck to you.
Thank you.